نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of this entire cosmos, and may the choicest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon his most beloved Muhammad Arabi, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallam. So we continue in this quest to realize the Islamic importance and the law pertaining to that of zakat, of obligatory charity, and today we will discuss the sort of personal assets which you own that are unculpable for zakat, okay, and the categories which you must be concerned with, which is largely personal possessions, okay, but we'll just cover the sort of different titles or the different sort of headings just so you're aware, okay. In terms of residential houses, the houses that you live in, the houses that you own, there's no zakat payable upon them, okay, because it is an asset, but nevertheless, because it's personal and it's residential, for that matter, you wouldn't pay zakat upon that. If you sold the property and then you had, let's say £200,000 sitting in your bank, that would be culpable to zakat on an annual basis, as long as you earned it, for the lunar year at least. And of course that's going to be well beyond the nisab level, so that would be culpable to zakat, but not the property as it sits there before it's being sold. If you are generating an income on the property, for example you have it rented, then that's a different matter entirely. That's business income, and again if it goes over the nisab level, that would be culpable, and zakat would be payable from that value, sort of after owning it for an entire year. Clothes for your body, okay, some people have more than others. Some people have hundreds of pairs of shoes, for instance. Again, no zakat will be payable upon that. Whether Allah would question, whether you were excessive in what you owned tomorrow, when we pass away, that's a different question entirely. However, from a strict legal point of view, you wouldn't need to pay zakat, upon personal assets with respect to your clothes and shoes and things like this, what you have for your own self, okay. Household goods, whether it be your sofas, televisions, things like this, again, no zakat is payable upon that. That's your own personal assets. It's something that you own for personal use, okay. Another class which is probably not as common in this day and age, unless you've got an interest for riding animals and things like this, which you use for your own personal use, whether it be horses, whether it be, you might have cattle, donkeys and things like this. If you are a farmer, for instance, again, if it's for personal use, then, it wouldn't be, there would be no zakat payable. For those farmers who do use cattle and things like this, for commercial means, then there is some zakat which is payable at times. But again, that's a different subject with respect to zakat, and a different facet and a branch which we'll cover at a later stage, inshallah ta'ala al-aziz. So again, slaves which are used for personal means, okay, for your own personal household chores and things like this, again, no zakat is payable on these kind of slaves. Largely, almost finished, especially in this part of the world, in the West and things like this. Here, slavery continues in some parts of Africa, but again, very, very rare. But as students of fiqh, and for the barakah, for the sake of the text, and in terms of knowing the law and having a fuller understanding of it, these things are mentioned, and we must be aware of them. So I mentioned that for the sake of barakah, for your own clarity and understanding. Okay, and again, weapons which are used for personal use, not for trade, for personal use. Again, there's no zakat payable upon them, and we know, for those people who have a keen sort of interest in a hobby towards weapons and collecting them and things like this, again, largely irrelevant in this day and age. We're not in the Arabian Peninsula in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where a man was considered, to be finished if he didn't have his sword in the desert when he travelled. Nowadays, we don't really have weapons and things like this. At best we have, knives which you use in the kitchen to cook vegetables and things like this. But again, just for the sake of barakah, just so you know and you're clear about this point, weapons for personal use, again, there would be no zakat payable upon that either. Another issue that I wanted to touch on before closing of this video was debts. Okay, now debts is an important sort of facet to this area of zakat which we must be aware of. When it comes to loaning out money to others. A lot of people are under the false impression that if I had £10,000 and I loaned out that £10,000 just before my zakat became payable, that perhaps they don't need to pay zakat. No, that's not the case, especially not with regards to Hanafi fiqh law and the law of jurisprudence in this respect. The fuqaha, who are the scholars of fiqh and the experts, they have said that if this money is given out to somebody else and you know there's going to be a reasonable belief that that money will be returned to you, and you know one day that will be returned to you, then you must continue to make payments of zakat upon that money or upon that value. That money is being held for you. You are the ultimate beneficiary, and you know, whoever holds it for you, they are ultimately you know, like a trustee in that respect. Okay, it's like money which is stored away. So nevertheless, you still need to pay zakat upon it, because you are still the true owner, the beneficiary of that money in that respect. Okay. So if you do have money borrowed out, and you know, I say this, that you know, imagine you know, you've only become aware of this rule at this point, then what you should do is try and make a calculation and assessment of how much money you had borrowed out and how many years you didn't pay zakat on it, and you should attempt to sort of make that payment. Okay, zakat is something which is obligatory, and it's qati with respect to the Quran, and we should make arrangements to backtrack and try and cover this value in this world, better than, you know, having to give an account to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next world. And again, as I've said many a time, it's only a very small amount sort of wealth which comes from your wealth, as 2.5%, which we pay to the poor and destitute, those who are needy in the world. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that this is not something which decreases your wealth, it's actually something which increases your wealth, protects your wealth, spiritually benefits you, benefits your property, and benefits sort of all your income and the barakah which is associated with it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to appreciate this area of law and develop upon it, and inshallah allow us to pay zakat in the way of that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and the Sahaba Kareem radiyallahu ta'ala. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh wal mubin.